Grief is one of the most painful emotional processes that we as humans experience in life. Yet grief is in everything. The path to acceptance is grief. And so that means that anything in this life that we have to accept, we experience grief to move to that place of acceptance. On a small scale of the disappointment that I might feel from going to the grocery store and finding out they don't have my favorite candy bar, to the large scale losses of people that we love and care about very much. Grief is an unavoidable process, one which we are typically done with way before grief is actually done with us. Yet we can't avoid or ignore the grief process. We can't go around it. We can't go under it. We can't skip it. We have to move through it emotionally. We have to allow ourselves to lean in, feel, and release emotions. Whatever duration of time our body says that we need to release those emotions. Typically longer than society says that we should be grieving. So that grief process is very individual. Typically it's the most intense up front, and then as time passes we start to get a few good days or less intense days. Maybe we'll call them more tolerable days here and there. And then over time we have more tolerable days than painful days. But they do still pop up around anniversaries, or we may regress back into a previous emotional state around special occasions or dates in which we would expect or anticipate to have that person with us that we lost. Navigating the grief process is trickier than we would like it to be, and it is possible to become stuck in that process. And when we become stuck, we're unable to move forward to the place of acceptance. And the end of grief, again, is acceptance. It doesn't mean that we'll never miss the person or we don't wish that they were still here. It's that we accept that things happened the way that they happened and that this person isn't physically in body on the earth with us anymore. So I'd like to share the two most common sticking points, as I'll call them, that prevent people from moving through the grief process. And understand that we will stay stuck in that grief process as long as we are stuck. Until I resolve these things, these barriers, I will be stuck in that place. I will not move to the place of acceptance. And that can last for years or decades or indefinitely. So the first is the inability to feel our feelings. As we've already said, the emotions are very overwhelming, almost intolerable at times. They're extremely painful, especially early on in the beginning, but we have to feel them. We have to find tools to allow us to tolerate those feelings as we can. If we move to a place of avoiding them quickly, we halt ourselves in the grief process. We're only grieving and moving through that process when we're feeling. If we're not feeling, we're not releasing. And that means that those emotions are going to be right there at that intensity waiting for us when we do tap back into it at some point, or when something happens that we're forced into it, which is usually what happens at a certain point. So it's important to embrace that we're going to have to feel these feelings and maybe seek out tools and techniques to be able to help tolerate them, because they will eventually pass. They will eventually decrease. We have more good days than bad days as time goes along. But in the beginning, it's moment to moment, day to day. And it's important that you allow your body to dictate that process. Allow your body to tell you when you need to feel and what you need to feel. Allow your body to tell you when you need to rest, when you need to be around others, when you need to be by yourself in solitude. It's important that you take care of yourself, that we not allow society or cultural expectations to dictate that process and override your body and what your body instinctively and intuitively knows that you need to do. Now, the next is in the narrative piece of the grief process. Anytime we're processing, that means that we're processing the emotional piece, and also we're creating a narrative, a logical piece. So we're putting together a narrative and emotions, stringing them together in a way that makes sense, that our brain can make sense of them and can eventually file it away and become something of the past. So part of the grief process is going back in our mind, thinking through the way that things happened, things we did, things we didn't do, things we said, things we didn't say. And sometimes we can become stuck in certain aspects of that. If I'm second guessing myself in things that I did or didn't do, or maybe blaming myself for things that were outside my control. Really making peace and accepting the decisions that I made as they were the best decisions that I could have made at the time based on the information that I had. And sometimes it can be difficult to accept those decisions that were made. We're looking for ways that we could have influenced the situation and had some ability to control the outcome, making the outcome different than what it is. Unfortunately, in most cases, there was nothing we could have done to make the outcome different than what it was. It was bigger than us. There were things that happened that if we could have stopped them, we would have, but we didn't have the ability to control that. And there's some aspect of having to accept that I couldn't control it. Now, some of these narrative sticking points can be around conflict. When they passed, we weren't on good terms. Perhaps the last interaction we had was an argument, or we said things we didn't mean. We never got to really resolve that. Any of those emotional pieces that we weren't able to resolve throughout life with that person will be sticking points. So if it was a parent that we had a conflictual relationship with and we never really got to make peace with certain aspects of childhood, things that we felt were missing or that we needed from them that we didn't get, then that grief process is bigger because we're also grieving the hope that we will ever get those needs met from that parent. That at the time of the loss, that hope dies with them. And so we also have to go back and accept that this is the relationship that I had with my parents and that they won't ever be able to meet those needs that I needed them to meet.